Good Wednesday evening, everyone. I'm Burke Weather meteorologist Scotty Powell, and you're watching another edition of the Carolinas Weather Group. And tonight we have a great guest on, Mr. Mike Bettis, on-air meteorologist for the Weather Channel. But you guys may know him as the chief meteorologist from WLOS back from, I guess, 1998 to 2003. And then Mike traveled on to the Weather Channel. So we're looking forward to having him on tonight and kind of just talking about his adventures here in the Carolinas and then going out to the Weather Channel and some storm chasing stories and all kinds of good stuff. So we're looking forward to going in with this hour with Mike and looking forward to having your interaction. We have a question and answer session if you're watching on YouTube right now. Also, Twitter, if you want to tweet us or Facebook us questions that we can ask Mike, we'll do that. And if you are listening on the podcast at a later date, this is the March 4th edition, Wednesday, March 4th edition with Mike Bettis. So with that, we are going to kind of let everybody introduce themselves on the panel, and then we will bring Mike in for the interview. So I'm going to start over to my far west, about 20 miles, or far east, about 20 miles, with Mr. Joey Mosteller in Catawba County. Joey?
Thank you, Scotty. Sorry, I was busy tweeting out our show right there. But, thanks for the introduction. I'm Joey. I kind of cover Catawba County weather. Nothing fancy. Kind of going to jump into our thing this week and skip over some stuff. But as we want to kind of go through our introductions here, some of you might remember Tim from last week. We invited Tim to come back and join us. Since we don't really have anybody from the far western sections over there in the mountains way out in Nashville, we figured Tim would be a good addition to the group. So, Tim, you want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, Tim Ballasty. You can find me on Twitter at Irish Eagle. I tweet a lot about Western North Carolina, also national stories. And been in Nashville for, I guess it's going to be actually 3 years coming up soon, actually this summer. So anyway, I'm getting to love Western North Carolina.
And it's a great time to be in Western North Carolina when you go from 40s to 70s in just a 24-hour time span. And we'll kick it up to the Hampton Roads area up in Virginia, where Ricky Matthews is home on spring break this week.
Yeah, spring break, but it really hasn't been warm at all except for today. I actually went out to our local beach, Grandview Beach today, and we were covered in a ton of sea fog. You would drive towards the beach, and just the beach was blanketed in it, but like a block away, there was nothing. We actually had a plane crash this morning at Norfolk International, and I've got a feeling the fog was a big reason for why it occurred. But other than that, it's about everything is going on up in this region, Scotty.
All right, and then down to the eastern part of North Carolina, our junior meteorologist, Mr. Austin Taylor, who is probably the next big thing in the weather world. Austin?
AKA the future.
That's true. Well, possibly true. Hopefully so. I'm Austin Taylor. I'm 15 years old, out of Harnett County. We got up to about 80 degrees today. It was nice. And by tomorrow night, winter mixing 20 degrees. Something's wrong with Mother Nature lately, but that's all that's happened around here.
And yes, Austin is really a smart kid, and we're glad that he was able to come on. I know school's been keeping him busy, so Austin, we're glad you're on. And Daniel Crawley is going to be on. He's having some tech issues with his new computer, but he's from McDowell County, and he will be with us shortly, hopefully. So, Ricky, with that, I will let you introduce our guests and get us started.
All right. There we go, and Daniel joins back. Yeah, Scotty's been doing pretty well at booking all these great guests. Tonight we have Mike Bettis from the Weather Channel and former WLOS meteorologist from Nashville joining us. Many of you probably remember Mike from his coverage of Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, and then, of course, the Reno tornado and Joplin tornadoes as well. So, Mike, welcome.
Hey, good to talk to you guys, and good to see some old familiar faces. Tim, haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're doing well.
Doing well, Mike. Thanks. You too.
Let's go ahead and start it off. Maybe tell people, why you got interested in weather, and kind of your first start wasn't in North Carolina; it was in Ohio, correct?
Yeah, I'm originally from Ohio. I grew up in the snow belt of Ohio, just outside of Akron, where it's lake effect snow is what it's all about in the wintertime. But I liked living in Ohio because it was a fun mix of all 4 seasons. And so many meteorologists I think have a story of some moment in their life that changed them, and they ended up, from there on out having this love affair with weather. I don't know if I ever really had that one moment in time where, something inspired me to be a meteorologist, but I think it was just being in the constant changing weather all the time is what maybe did it for me. And I grew up watching famous Dick Goddard in Cleveland. He was the meteorologist there when my parents were kids, and he's actually still going. He's been the meteorologist there since the 60s, and he's still going strong. And I think he was the guy that kind of inspired me to go into a career in math and science. And I think that for me, weather was just a pretty natural fit. I always had a curiosity about it, and I went to Ohio State and got a degree in meteorology there. Ended up getting my first job in Dayton, Ohio. Then I worked in Columbus for a little while. Then eventually left Columbus on to Asheville. Worked there for 3 years. Had a really great time in Western North Carolina. Had never lived anywhere but Ohio, so it was my first time out of the state to live somewhere else, which was fun. And then next thing you know, I found my way to Atlanta and the Weather Channel.
And so with your time in North Carolina, do you have any events that you remember, maybe big snowstorms, big weather events? We get the tropical cyclones that come up a lot and drops a lot of rain. Anything that stands out from your time in Asheville?
Oh yeah, there was I distinctly remember a snowstorm that I had significantly under forecasted for. That season had seemed like it was just every storm either seemed to just go around Asheville or it just fizzled. Once it got to the mountains, it seemed like that was the theme the whole season. So I had significantly under forecasted. I believe it was like a Friday afternoon, and Jason Boyer, who is there now as the chief meteorologist, was working mornings that day, I remember, and I got up and it had been pouring snow, and I called him. I was like, "Oh, dude, what happened?" He's like, "When are you coming to work?" I was like, "As soon as I can." Usually I didn't get to work till maybe around 2 o'clock or so for the evening shows, but I was like, I'll be there, before the noon news. So I remember leaving my house at around 11 o'clock. And I lived about 12, I'll never forget this, lived about 12 miles from the station, and the traffic was so bad and the weather was so bad, there were like jackknife trucks everywhere. I couldn't get to work. It took me 3 hours to go 12 miles. And I remember Boyer was like calling me. He's like, "Where are you, dude? Where are you? I've been here all day. I gotta go home. I gotta go home." I was like, "I'm not sure I'm gonna make it for the news." You gotta cover for me. I was like, "You can't leave until I get there." And I got to work and I just was like, "I can't believe this has happened." But yeah, that to me was the most memorable storm that hit while I was there. And the first time I'd actually ever seen or heard thunder snow before was in that snowstorm. So it was memorable for sure.
It seems like for every meteorologist out there, there's one event in their career that they always look back on and they're like, "Wow, I wish I had done a little better forecasting that one." And it kind of defines their career almost for a while.
Well, that one was, what's the great thing about forecasting in Western North Carolina, like any kind of mountainous region, Denver or what have you, is usually the viewer is fairly forgiving because they know that it's a pretty difficult place to forecast, and so you have that benefit. But still, as a meteorologist, you want to get it right, and you go back afterwards, you're like, "Oh, why didn't I see that?" Or "Why didn't," there was always something that you feel like you missed a piece of the puzzle. But I think people understand it's not an exact science, and we beat ourselves up over it, but probably a day or two later, no one even remembers.
And I think that's good advice too for a lot of younger people who may watch our podcast. Go back and look at what went wrong. So, because I mean that's what really defines the difference between someone who's just able to look at the models and throw out a number versus someone who's actually able to forecast and pick out the details.
Well, I think with computer models, I mean they're so good these days that it's easy just to trust them and say that looks good to me. They take into consideration so many different things that we don't have necessarily time in the day to look at every single possible thing. So it's sometimes you just especially if it's had a track record of being good, you just go ahead and blindly trust it sometimes. But I think if you want to be a good meteorologist, always doing some sort of post-analysis, whether your forecast was good or not, is always a good practice to have.
Hey,
So
Mike.
sorry, Scotty, go ahead.
Hey, Mike, do you miss forecasting the wedge here in Western North Carolina?
No. I'm like living in it either down here in Georgia. We get so spoiled by the warm weather that when you get locked in that wedge, you're like, what the heck? Again, low clouds and 20 degrees colder than we wanted it to be. I don't, it's honestly when I lived in, I had never even heard of the wedge until I moved to until I had moved to North Carolina. I was like, what the heck is the wedge? Like in Ohio, we don't have the wedge. Usually when I was living in Columbus, it's like whatever happens in Indianapolis happens in Columbus 3 hours later. It was an easy place to forecast. When you throw mountains into the equation and all that, it's a learning experience, that's for sure.
So after your time at WLS, you moved on to maybe the national weather scene. Talk about how you got into that and how that opportunity came up.
Really, just kind of by chance, honestly. The Weather Channel had called and said, "Would you like to come for an interview?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm not really interested." Like I enjoyed doing local weather. And I was like, "Nah, the Weather Channel doesn't really interest me." And I was encouraged to go for the interview, and I was like, "All right." So I reluctantly went for the interview, and I got to tell you, like when I went there for my interview, I was blown away. I was like, you know what? The Weather Channel is a lot cooler than I thought it was going to be. I totally did a 180. I had this whole preconceived notion of what it was going to be and the whole deal, and they totally changed my mind. And I'll never forget after that, I had called a friend of mine and said, "Oh man, God, I hope I didn't blow it. I hope they offer me a job." And it took a while. I think I'd interviewed maybe in like July or something like that, and then I was covering Hurricane. What occurred? I think I was covering Hurricane Floyd, maybe. I don't even remember. No, Isabel, Hurricane Isabel, out in Nags Head in 2003, and it was literally the day after the hurricane. I was doing some aftermath coverage. The weather had actually turned pretty nice the next day, and the Weather Channel called me the day after the hurricane. They're like, "Hey, would you like to come and work for us? Then we'd love to have you here by Christmas." And I was just like, "Yeah, this is awesome, cool."
Talk about your time during Isabel, because that was a huge storm that impacted us up here in Hampton Roads, and especially the Ocracoke Island area and all the regions of eastern North Carolina.
Yeah, it was. I thought that was a pretty interesting storm. I had been out, to the Outer Banks to cover Hurricane Bonnie in 1998, Floyd in 99, which kind of did all kinds of weird things, right along the coastline. Didn't exactly want to make landfall, and then eventually decided it wanted to, and was a big rainmaker. But Isabel, was a pretty solid forecast, and I distinctly remember, just how it had cut off the islands, and it was a big surge maker, and a lot of homes had gotten washed out into the ocean. And where we were in Nags Head and Kitty Hawk, it was one of those deals where the surge comes in and it'll cut channels through the beaches and back through neighborhoods. And then one thing I distinctly remember was that the National Guard was there, and they were literally cutting, because what happens is that water will come in and then it gets trapped in some of those neighborhoods because it can't go back out, because you've got the big dunes and everything there, or it can't find its way back out the channel it came in, or even just the rainfall. And so the National Guard was there, and they were literally cutting big trenches, through these neighborhoods and through the dunes to let the water escape back to the beach and drain these neighborhoods. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. But a big power outage loss too. I mean, there were power poles down everywhere, a lot of wind damage with that one. I think if I remember, I think it had just weakened to a Cat 2 before it made landfall. But kind of for all practical purposes, it was a high 2 or a low end Cat 3.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I was in 5th grade at the time when Isabel made landfall, but it was the storm that still is pretty fresh in my mind as being the biggest event for Hampton Roads and probably for Northeast North Carolina, at least in the recent 10-year period or something, besides maybe Irene and Sandy.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you look at, because North Carolina just sticks out there, like a sore thumb, it's such a target, and I think they've actually been relatively fortunate, when you consider, what could be with some of these huge storms that are either near misses. Last year even there was Arthur, which was just a glancing blow, and even with, Isabel, when we had Irene, that was a pretty decent storm, but considering that the time of year that hit and what it could have been, I think that North Carolina escaped pretty well and up through Virginia. It could have been worse. There's certainly been bigger storms, so hopefully we're not due for one.
And have you been inside the eye of a hurricane before?
I have been in the eye wall. I've never actually been in the eye of the hurricane before. I went
The
through
famous video with Ike, right, Mike?
Ike and Ivan. Ivan in Pensacola in 2004. I think we were in the eye wall there for about 6 hours. That was brutal. That was a Cat 3 at landfall, and I saw all kinds of strange things that night that I had never seen before. I literally saw a vending machine like fly down the street past me, and I was just like dodging debris in the streets. And I remember getting in my hotel that night when that made landfall. It made landfall at night, and it was everything's powers out, the whole deal. I remember we had this little mom and pop cinder block hotel. It was 3 stories tall, and I remember we were finished doing our live shots about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I go in, I sit down in my room, and I was like, oh man, I'm exhausted. And there were no power or anything. And I remember just kind of closing my eyes, sitting back in a chair in my room, and I could just feel the hotel swaying back and forth. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going out this way. So I actually left my room. I thought the hotel was going to collapse, and went out and grabbed our cameraman, and we slept in a Suburban that night, in between 2 buildings to kind of block the wind. I think sleep is probably an overused word. I think we just kind of dozed off every now and then because you couldn't sleep with those kind of winds. And then in Hurricane Ike that made landfall in Texas, we were in the Houston area, and there was again another nighttime landfalling hurricane. I was doing a live shot for I think MSNBC at the time, and just as they had tossed to me, I had kind of turned my body kind of into the wind, and this big gust of wind just hit me right in the face and knocked me back. I tripped over the curb that was right there, fell over some bushes onto a hood of a car, and then
there's video on that. Yeah,
I was going to ask, is there video?
It was not a great. Not
video.
Not
only is there, not only is there video, but in my opinion, that went. I mean, even before things go viral today, as we know it, that went viral back then, just via, I don't know, via emails or whatnot. I think on YouTube for sure. But it was just a classic, meteorologist in the eye wall getting blown away.
it was not a graceful moment, to say the least. It was I got teased quite a bit after that. When I get back to the station, people gave me a good ribbing about that one. So it was funny.
Continuing with the hurricanes, I mean, you were in Sandy as well. Sandy as well, but also Katrina was the one I was going to hit on, but we'll hit on Sandy first. How did covering Sandy in the Northeast compare to covering hurricanes in the Southeast?
Well, I think the big difference with Sandy was just the pure population, that was affected. You go to the Northeast, you go to, New Jersey and New York. I mean, it's so dense there, and these folks aren't used to getting these types of storms. I mean, it's so out of the ordinary for these things to make a left-hand hook like that. Every time you see something start out, making that right turn at North Carolina, you immediately think it's gone. It's going to get picked up and it's going to take off into the North Atlantic. And I think for so many people, they literally lived their entire lives there. I mean, people that were 60, 70, 80 years old, same thing for them. And, they had no recollection of storms like this hitting them before. So I think when Sandy hit, it was an eye-opener on how ill-prepared some of our Northeast states are to handle big catastrophes like that. I think in my experience in covering these things, probably the state that's most equipped is Florida. I mean, I think they do a great job. And I think all the coastal communities there are well prepared for hurricanes. You go north of Virginia, and they don't give them a whole lot of thought. I think Sandy changed that for a lot of people, and I think when you just look at the infrastructure that was destroyed, homes, fatalities, these types of things, the numbers are mind-boggling, and I think it was one of those wake-up calls for the Northeast.
So if you have a city you think is most at risk from some type of hurricane, what would you say it is?
Oh, if I had to go with today, Tampa. I think Tampa because, it takes a lot, something out of the ordinary would have to happen for Tampa to get a pretty serious a hurricane. Usually when a hurricane goes into the Gulf of Mexico, it's going up to the Panhandle, or it's going to Louisiana, Texas, someplace like that, and it's got a head of steam. Usually if it's going to make a right-hand turn and go into, say, Tampa, it's probably going to get picked up by a really strong cold front or something like that, I think like Wilma did. And it's just not a usual track for a hurricane to go. And so I think in Tampa, they're just so, I wouldn't say they're ill prepared, but I have a feeling that because of how much has been built up there, when you consider you've got, St. Pete, and you've got, Clearwater, and then you've got the huge population of Tampa, I think that that's probably one of the more vulnerable cities, and maybe just mentally they're not prepared for something like this. I think Miami is different. I think Miami is very, very susceptible, but I think they know the risk there. I think in Tampa, they've never really lived through it before, so it's not fresh in anybody's mind at all.
Mike, you're talking about Tampa, but as we look throughout the past couple of years, I mean, the southeastern United States as a whole, from Texas up to the Virginia, we haven't really seen a big event happen in quite a while in hurricane season. Do you think a lot of people may have kind of out of sight, out of mind, and they've kind of just pushed that to the side? Do you think they're as ready now, even in those hurricane-prone cities, as what they were during the peak time of hurricane season when we had several storms in the Atlantic a few years back?
Well, I think we let our guard down sometimes if it's not fresh. So you have to go back to Hurricane Ike or whatever, for a major metropolitan area that hasn't been hit for years. I think we kind of forget and we get maybe a little bit complacent, and then that leads to last minute decisions. It leads to emergency managers maybe not being as proactive as they would have been otherwise, and I think it can cause some issues. That's why I think doing a lot of drills, doing a lot of practice, especially for emergency managers and states, it's so important, especially in hurricane-prone areas, just because it has such a huge impact on everything. From everything to the economy, to infrastructure, to tourism. I mean, all these things are so heavily impacted, and it becomes a huge loss for states. And you just have to have all your ducks in a row.
Joey, I believe, has a few viewer questions that have come in if he wants to throw to those.
All right, yeah, I'll throw a couple out here kind of as they fit. Here's one since we mentioned Virginia a little while ago. Question is, what is your favorite state to chase in, and have you ever been detailed to a Southwest Virginia or North Carolina? And if you did, what did you like most about that?
Have I been to a what?
Have you ever been? I guess basically, have you ever been sent to Southwest Virginia or North Carolina on a chase?
On a chase? No. Although, the only place I've ever been to cover tornadoes, I was in Raleigh a couple years ago when they had the big outbreak. When was that? 2011? Was that 2011?
April 16th, 2011, yeah.
2011, yeah. So that was more aftermath than it was to chase. For me, I mean, there's no better place than western Kansas or eastern Colorado. It is just pancake flat. You can see forever. If you get surprised by a tornado, it's your own fault, because I mean, you literally can see a thunderhead from 150 miles away, and it's just a great place to chase. It's an easy place to chase. It's you don't get a ton of chaser convergence there because it's a far trip from Oklahoma City. If you're going to go to western Kansas, it's not that close to Denver either, so you don't get a ton of chaser convergence there. So it's a great place, my favorite.
And square roads.
Go ahead, Joey.
And square roads out there.
Yeah, everything's north, south, east, and west, so it makes it very easy.
Easier to follow. And isn't the Colorado area known for a lot of the LP supercells, Mike?
Yeah, they generally have a pretty dry atmosphere there coming off the mountains, and so you get these really beautiful, picturesque storms with hardly any rain in them. And if you do get a hail shaft, I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous and nice and tight. And if you're a photographer, it's a dream, to be out there. And there's nothing in the way. There are no trees in the way to get in the way of your picture, or you actually getting line of sight on it. So it's a great place to go.
One more I'll throw out here, then I have a couple others we'll get to later. But Jessica Holland, I want to make sure I throw this one out there for you. First off, she wants to say that she's watched you for many years, always been a big idol, and she aspires to be a well-known meteorologist one day, just like you are. She said when she heard of the accident at Reno, she was actually in tears and was so scared until she found out that you were all right. But her question is, what element of the weather are you most afraid of? She says she loves watching lightning, but she's always feared being struck.
Yeah, lightning. I would say lightning. You know, it's probably weird for me to say it's not tornadoes, having been struck by one, but it's really not. I mean, it's lightning because it's so unpredictable. You know, we've been out there covering the weather. You know, I think we've been chasing about 6 straight years now for the Weather Channel. And anytime we stop to do a live report for the Weather Channel, it's always in some sort of thunderstorm. And next thing you know, you've got cracks behind you, and you're like, whoa. And, you know, that's my fear, is that one day I'm going to be out there reporting, and next thing you know, bam, I'm going to get struck by a bolt of lightning. But back in the car, anytime you hear that crack, it is back in the car. But we probably should have known better even to be out there in the first place. So last year was probably the first year we were smart about it and did a lot of our in-storm reports from the passenger cam inside the vehicle, because, you know, it scares me to death. I remember doing... post-Joplin, the day after Joplin, I was out there doing the nightly news with Brian Williams, and there was lightning everywhere. And I was freaking out. I was like, I can't go on. Like, we're going to get killed. I mean, there was a whole production crew. Brian Williams is there. Al Roker is there, and we're all supposed to talk about this tragic tornado, and it is lightning left and right. And I was just thinking to myself, I really just want to cancel this because I don't want to go out this way. And our producer, Mike, that I was with, he's like, dude, I'm bailing on you. I'm sorry. He's like, I'm getting in the car, and I'm driving to the hotel. You're on your own. That's probably about as scared as I've ever been in a lightning storm before. And actually, it was that day after the Joplin tornado, the police officer was actually struck and killed by lightning while he was doing search and rescue. It was dangerous the day after.
I always tell people that 80% of lightning strike victims are male. So when you're out there next time, wear a wig.
Right. Or use your brains like women do, apparently. They're no dummies. I mean, the rest of us, I don't know what's wrong with us. We feel like we just can, you know, I don't know.
Mike, you mentioned Joplin, so we'll just dive straight into that. Talk about how that whole day unfolded, you know. Talk about thinking back the day before, realizing the dynamics in play and the potential for thunderstorms that afternoon.
That morning, we were in Kansas City, and had looked at everything that morning, and it was a no-brainer. Like, Joplin was really the only place we were going to go. Southwest Missouri was it, and Joplin's about the only, you know, decent-sized town in Southwest Missouri once you get, you know, west of Springfield. And everything was just aimed right at Joplin. And I remember we were heading down that way, and storms had actually fired up a little bit earlier than we had thought they would initiate. And we had stopped. We had kind of gone a little bit farther west. We were going to go over to, you know, just over the state line into Kansas and then kind of follow back into Missouri. And storms had actually popped up almost right on top of us. So we ended up edging just a little bit, probably in that instance, just a hair too far west. We were in Columbus, Kansas, and a storm popped up right over top of us, and we stopped and we did a live report from Columbus, and it was just a regular thunderstorm at that point. Nothing terribly impressive about it at that moment. And then we stopped our report. The Weather Channel said, you know, we'll talk to you later. And so we got in our cars, and we're going to follow it back towards Joplin, and we get in our cars, and we ride in a caravan of 3 vehicles, and we're driving back east toward Joplin, and the sky just turns pitch black. I mean, you couldn't see hardly anything, and it started hailing really bad, and we were all like, holy cow, that storm, you know, just blew up. And it was hailing so hard, and the rain was coming down so hard that we had to pull over to the side of the road. We couldn't go any longer, and then we had to let the meat of the storm go past us, so we follow in basically right behind it. We come into Joplin, and we've got our scanners on, and you just hear all kinds of traffic from dispatch, and we hear this fire station has been hit, and we're like, holy cow, like, that just, everything just happened so quickly. It really took us by surprise. We start pulling into Joplin, and we start seeing some damage to homes. Nothing terrible, but I mean, you had some roof damage, some trees that were uprooted, this kind of thing. And the farther we drove into Joplin, the worse it got, and the worse it got, and the worse it got. And we ended up stopping at this fire station that was hit. And we got to this fire station, and we pulled into Joplin literally right after the tornado. We estimated we got there about 9 minutes after the tornado had struck. We got to this fire station, and it had two of the walls, brick fire station, had collapsed, and we literally see these firefighters just pulling bricks off this car, and they're in there with their picks, and they're trying to free what I didn't know at the time was a family that had actually pulled into the fire station looking for a safe shelter. They had already locked all their doors and closed everything, and they had already taken shelter like in their kitchen, and they didn't even know the family was out there. And so then they get out of there. I mean, their engines had been crushed, the doors had fallen in on it and everything, so they couldn't do anything except use the packs they had. And they were literally digging this family out as soon as they opened the doors. And so they started search and rescue immediately at their own parking lot. And then we ended up I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. Like, this is our shot. We got to go live now. And next thing I know, I kind of started looking down the street, and I was like, oh, well, hold on a second. Like, man, what's that big building over there? That thing's been hit. And I start walking down there with our cameraman, and I met this woman. She's like, that's St. Joseph's Hospital. I was like, that's a hospital? I was like, I don't know anything about Joplin. Is that like a new hospital? She goes, no, it's not new, but it's fully operational. And I was like, holy cow. And then I just took a look, and you could see, 360 degrees, everything was flattened. And I just remember at the time thinking, oh my goodness, this may be the biggest disaster I've ever seen. And at the time I didn't say that on TV, but it's what I was thinking. And when you finally, days later, got the scope of it, you realized it was the biggest tornado we had seen, the worst tornado disaster we had seen in many, many decades.
Mike, how much daylight did you have after arriving on the scene?
Not a ton. I'd say about maybe 2.5 hours of daylight after the tornado came, and it was just chaos. I just remember just walking through, the different neighborhoods, and it was just chaos. People were crying. I had never seen anything. I had never seen a dead body before, and there were literally, people who had been killed by the tornado, literally lying on the sidewalk in their front yard, and it was just it just made you sick to your stomach, knowing that there was just very little that you could do. People were, pulling other people out of homes. I saw a guy, pull his dog out of his house, and the dog had like a broken leg, and he was, crying, and it was just, it was incredibly sad, incredibly sad.
So, Mike, we mentioned so many things. Tell us about maybe a few. Sorry, Scotty. A few good things that came out of Joplin. Obviously, your dog Joplin came out of that.
Yeah, that was awesome. We had gone back about a month after the tornado to do some follow-up reports on how the city was doing a month after the tornado, and they had the ASPCA and the Joplin Humane Society literally had these two giant warehouses of cats and dogs. I think they had something like 800 animals that had been abandoned after the tornado or had no home after the tornado. And we were in there, and I just see this just pathetic-looking golden retriever. She's just like sad, and she's underweight, and I took to her, and next thing you know, she was coming home with me, and so we hooked up with a pretty cool organization, Pilots and Paws. It's basically these private pilots. They work for a nonprofit. The organization is they fly, animals to and from new homes, and so they hooked us up with this pilot. He goes by Uncle Jim is what he goes by, but he grew up in Joplin. He lived in Knoxville at the time, and he's like, you know what, I got to do something for my hometown. So he actually flew to Joplin, picked up my dog, and our producer Mike also got a dog as well, a cattle dog, and flew them both back to Knoxville. My wife drove up to Knoxville and picked up the two dogs and brought them down to Atlanta, and it's been awesome. She's the greatest thing. She was a little shy at first, but she's loosened up, and she's a nice reminder of what happened there. But she's doing great, and she's been good for our family.
Tell us a little more about that company that flies the animal. Because I'm a private pilot myself, and I haven't heard of it before, but it's something that I'd be interested in getting involved with.
Yeah, they're really great. Anytime that there's a big disaster, say like Joplin, they offer their services literally. I believe it's arranged through the ASPCA, but I think they have connections with a lot of humane societies as well. And anytime an adoption occurs that's maybe out of state or something like that, or maybe farther than the adopting family wants to travel for the animal, then Pilots and Paws will literally pick up the animal, put them in their plane, and then fly to the nearest airport and deliver the animal. So it happens after natural disasters. It happens anytime there's, something like a big a puppy mill or something like that, and the humane societies, got a huge litter of maybe dogs or cats that they want to adopt out. Pilots and Paws usually does a pretty good job of helping it out. All nonprofit, they do a great job.
Mike, we're talking about Joplin, but a couple of weeks before that was the Tuscaloosa, Alabama tornadoes. 2011 seemed to be just a very above average, strong tornado season. What kind of role did you play in Alabama? Did you get to go down and see that? And I'm sure I was watching some of your live coverage and stuff, and I know you got really emotional in Joplin because of what you had seen from the Alabama tornadoes. And just describe that season as a whole, the 2011 tornado season.
Yeah, that was just a tough season, and the big super outbreak was, it made us all just so nervous at the Weather Channel because we knew what it had the ability to do. And at the time, I remember I was working morning shift at the time, and so that afternoon, all I did was go home and had the Weather Channel on the whole afternoon. And I'll never forget. There are a couple things I'll never forget about the coverage. Was Jeff Morrow standing kind of on this hill in Birmingham, and they go to him, and he turns around and he goes, "Look at that!" I was like, "What? Oh my God! It's a giant tornado." And it was that Tuscaloosa tornado, just coming toward Birmingham. Then I was like, my goodness, that is bad news. And then the next day, I remember Paul Goodloe. I ended up covering storms up in North Georgia when they did some damage up in North Georgia. But I remember watching Paul Goodloe's report from Tuscaloosa, and where he was, everything had been flattened. And so when I was in Joplin, there was a moment where I kind of turned around and I looked back through the neighborhoods there, and it just reminded me of what Paul Goodloe had seen in Tuscaloosa. And we knew that there were so many people that were killed by that Tuscaloosa tornado, and it just finally clicked to me. It said, you are going to have to report on a lot of people that have been killed by this tornado. And it's not, that's when you don't enjoy being a meteorologist, when you have to report on stuff like that. And it just kind of got to me. It was more than I could take because everything around me was chaotic. Everyone around me was sad and crying, and at that point you just couldn't help but get emotional.
Did that change your perception at all, Mike, of severe weather and tornadoes in general, from maybe post or pre-2011 versus post-2011?
Yeah, oh, for sure. When there's so many times we had gone out, and it's it's an adventure. You go out there and you storm chase, and I think for anybody, if you go out and you see a disaster firsthand, it always changes your perspective. And I think 2011 certainly did that, and especially Joplin, having been there especially was so fresh. So many times when we arrive after a disaster, it's a day later. It takes us a while to get to something. This was so fresh. Having been there less than 10 minutes after it happened, it gave me a whole new perspective on what people go through in the immediate aftermath of something like a tornado and how their lives are literally changed in an instant. And unfortunately, that repeated itself in Moore, Oklahoma in 2013. Same thing. We were pretty close. We weren't as close as Joplin, but it was one of those deals where it's fresh. You're there so quick afterwards, and you see just how tough it is.
Mike, I can't wait to get to talk about El Reno in a second. But I had one other question. I actually went back today and watched some more of the coverage from the Joplin tornado, just a refresher before we did the show. And his name is, I think it was Larry. The guy he was helping was trying to find his neighbor. Did they ever find his neighbor? I never heard.
So I know what you're talking about very distinctly. The gentleman that we had run into during some of our live reports, his name is John, and he was close with his neighbor Larry, and both of their homes had been destroyed by the tornado, and he couldn't find Larry as an elderly gentleman that lived next door to him, so he was really worried about him. He'd actually called for search and rescue. They'd come over with the dogs multiple times, searching through his home. It had just collapsed down. They thought maybe it was in the crawl space or something. And then there was a shelter that a lot of people went to nearby. There was a community center just up the street. He thought maybe he'd gone there. No one has seen him. Anything. Nothing. Here to find out, that morning he'd actually driven to Florida to go visit his daughter, and John didn't know this. And so he was panicked, for a day that he couldn't find him, and John's cell phone didn't work, the battery had died, there was very little cell coverage, and so he had no idea. And then it got its own life on Facebook, I believe, and everyone was trying to find Larry, and eventually, like 2 days later, next thing you know, Larry comes back home, and he's like, "Hey, John, how's things going?" He's like, "Oh my God, Larry, where you been?" So it was kind of a funny reunion, but the whole time he wasn't even there.
Well, I could definitely say from watching that John cared for Larry, because he was definitely searching for him.
Yeah, he was choked up. He was panicked about it, and I felt so bad for him at the time because I was thinking the worst. I was like, he's something bad has happened to Larry, because everything he was saying was he's always home. I always check on him. We take care of each other. And so I was thinking the worst, and it ended up being a pretty good outcome.
Mike, I know that we're going to get to the more in El Reno tornadoes, but kind of just maybe close the chapter on Joplin. I was there just last week and standing where the memorial's at, with the park and overlooking the different tributes and stuff. Have you been back to Joplin recently, maybe in the last year or two, and kind of just stood there and took it all in and was like, man, last time I remember seeing this was chaos, but now you start to see the rebuilding process?
It's been about a year since I've been there, and every time I've gone, it's gotten better and better and better. And you see more homes go up, more businesses go up. They're dedicating the new hospital this month, and there are times I've stood, I've gone right back to the same spots where we broadcast from, and I remember taking pictures with me that I had taken back when the tornado had struck, and then I took new pictures of what it looked like now, and it's night and day. I mean, everyone knows what happened, but I think that now Joplin doesn't necessarily, it's their history, but they don't want to be defined by it. I stood there in Cunningham Park, and you could just look over to the west where a neighborhood had been wiped out, and I remember it so distinctly when I was there, and then where the hospital was across the street, and then when I turned back to the east and had seen all the neighborhood that had been wiped out, and now it's all cleaned up and the debris is gone and more homes have gone up, and it gives you a pretty good feeling.
It does, and I'm sure you could speak on this. Just talking to the few folks that I did last week, like you said, it's in their history, but it's really made them a more strong and tight-knit community than what happened before the tornado that came through.
For sure, and I think they've learned a lot from it. I think it's made them a lot stronger. I think it brought out the best in a lot of people, not just folks that live in Missouri, but so many volunteers flocked to Joplin afterwards just to do whatever they could, and I think Joplin was just so appreciative of that. How many people wanted to come and help? That it's something they'll never forget, and they even have a little tribute to the volunteers. They made a great YouTube video and everything that's really awesome, and we spent a lot of time with the high schoolers. Their school was knocked out, and we spent some time with them during the tornado, then after the tornado a year later, and I think time heals a lot of wounds there, and I think that the town is doing much better now than I think it was really tough for them, even for the first year or two even, but I think things have gotten a lot better for them now. I'm proud of them.
Yeah, now I took pictures at the tribute, and I was just looking. Over 126,000 volunteers volunteered in Joplin, with over 775,000 volunteer hours. So I
It's
mean,
crazy, right?
it's crazy to see such a disaster bring so many people together. But we see that a lot here in the United States, which is makes you feel proud about where you live.
Yeah, it really does. I think when we, I think it's just in our nature to help. When someone has lost everything, I always think, what would it be like if that were me? And all of us are so proud. We all, none of us want to accept somebody else's help. We feel like we can maybe do it on our own, but I think there are some circumstances where we can't, and we have to recognize that we can't. And this is when it's good to know your neighbor, and this is when it's good, to reach out to somebody for help. And Joplin was, in my opinion, in the years that I've covered weather, the greatest response after a disaster that I've ever seen from the public as a whole. I thought it was great. I mean, I know we know Katrina was another great example of that, and there were, a lot of money was raised, but this was just people saying, you know what, I've just got to go, and people literally just packed up their pickup truck with stuff, and they just went because they felt this compelling need to be there and help.
So we'll shift gears one more time to a different tornado, and I'm sure one that's pretty well known to most people who are going to watch our show, and that's El Reno. Take us through the same way you did with Joplin, Mike. Tell us, just like you kind of did at NWA, I was there in Charleston when you went over your presentation, about how that morning began and then how everything unfolded.
That was a day that we knew that tornadoes were going to be pretty bad. They were going to be, they were going to fire up pretty rapidly. The instability was high, Cape values were high. It was a no-brainer that something was going to happen that day. And we had started off kind of positioning ourselves north of Oklahoma City. We were close to Guthrie, and we were just kind of watching for stuff to potentially fire on I-35. The convergence was going to happen a little bit west of Oklahoma City. We were watching the Oklahoma mesonet pretty closely, and everything was converging near El Reno. And we had actually been in El Reno. Ironically, El Reno was hit by a tornado after the Joplin tornado. Just 2 days later, 2 or 3 days later after Joplin, El Reno was hit back in 2011. And so we had been there before. We were familiar. And I knew there would be a lot of probably chaser convergence in El Reno. Everyone was parking there, and I kind of didn't really want to be in El Reno because there'd be a lot of traffic and whatnot. So even though that was probably the place to be, we're kind of hedging our bets maybe a little bit outside of there, maybe slightly north, somewhere between Guthrie and El Reno. So we had done some reports early in the afternoon around Guthrie, and we made our way slowly towards El Reno. We weren't necessarily in a hurry, and saw some more storms fire up and initiate around Kingfisher, which is north of El Reno. So we decided to go ahead and hop on those and do some reports, and NBC had called us and said, hey, we need some stuff for 6:30. We need you to do some hits with Brian Williams. And I'm like, things are really starting to get active. I'm not sure what our availability is going to be. But we ended up stopping in Kingfish and doing some reports for NBC, and it was just bad timing, honestly, because in that moment that we had kind of gone up to the northern storms that were initiating during our time there in Kingfisher, and our downtime, we stopped to broadcast. The storm fired up near El Reno, and so we're a little bit behind that one, unfortunately. So we're racing back south. We're about 25 minutes, too far north. So we're hammering south, and we run into some hail, and we get toward El Reno, and there's a little bridge that goes, through El Reno, and I remember getting up on that bridge and looking, and I'm like, holy cow, look at that tornado. And so we could see it, but there were a lot of trees and stuff. We were trying to position ourselves somewhere where we could get a good line of sight on it and broadcast. We end up north of I-40, and we could see it kind of from the airport. It was, I remember having my video camera out and shooting out the window. You could see it between buildings and what have you, but we couldn't find an opening necessarily. And so we end up going down just south of I-40, and then there's a clearing, and there's a big wide berm, and it's clear as day. There's a massive tornado right there. And so we stop, and I remember, Greg Forbes was on air with Chris Warren, and we're able to broadcast very quickly because we have a mobile satellite truck that has a gyro. How it works for us is we have this big gyro stabilized satellite truck, and so it can broadcast while in motion, which most satellite trucks can't. So it gives us a little bit of advantage while chasing because time, is of the essence. And so we literally park, hop out of our vehicle, and broadcast 30 seconds later. And I got this massive tornado behind me. It's that aquamarine colored sky, and it's the biggest tornado I've ever seen in my life. And we broadcast for about a minute or so, and we decided that for our safety, we wanted to shut down the broadcast. We could have kept broadcasting. We wanted to shut down the broadcast and get south. For us, typically the south side of a storm is the best for our broadcasting purposes because our satellite truck still has to shoot a signal through a thunderstorm up to a satellite in space in order to broadcast. And so if the storm is moving east or northeast, us being on the south side of town kind of puts us out of the danger as the storm rolls away from us, and we can get a clear shot to the satellite that orbits at the equator. So it's better for us than having to try to punch our signal through a big giant thunderstorm, which will disrupt the signal and knock us off the air. So, for me, this is kind of always my MO is get to the south side of the storm, and then we'll just follow in behind it. In this instance, it was okay. Let's head south. Let's stop this broadcast. Let's get out of the way of this thing. Let's go south. And in that time that we went south, the tornado had turned slightly, it had expanded. When we were broadcasting, the tornado was about 1.5 miles wide, and as we were going south, it expanded another mile. In about 4 minutes, it widened by about 1 mile, the total parent circulation. And we had gotten down the highway there, and I could look out my window to the right, and I could see, vortices spinning everywhere. It was like spaghetti dancing out of the clouds. It was pretty scary. And I just remember we have radios, and I'm communicating to the guys. At this point, I don't care what the speed limit is. Like, we have to go as fast as we can because this thing is catching us. And we were in 2 lanes going south, and we're in the left-hand lane. And I remember our lead vehicle, one of our support vehicles, the big Suburban. I remember watching his vehicle kind of go off into the right-hand lane, and I remember saying to our cameraman Austin, who was also driving, I was like, "Why is he changing lanes?" And then I realized he wasn't actually changing lanes. He was getting pulled into the inflow in his big Suburban. He was getting pulled off the road, and I remember him watching his vehicle getting pulled sideways into the ditch. And at that point, I knew, I literally thought he was dead. I thought that our engineer, Kevin, was dead. I was like, he's not going to survive. And next thing I know, I'm just telling the guys in the vehicle, okay, prepare. We're about to get hit. Everybody duck down, get below the windows, and we're going to have to ride this one out. And next thing you know, seconds later, we get hit on the passenger side, and we get tossed over the median, over the northbound lanes, and into a field, and we're just, floating in the air, and then we just start tumbling, over and over and over. It was just, afterwards, now seeing it, because the video is crazy, our cameraman Brad, who was in the back seat, was shooting the tornado out the window, and he had hit record on his camera. And just as I said, duck down, he had put his camera down on the back seat, and he had rolled his window up, and he had gotten down. And when we got hit and the truck started tumbling, the camera literally flew out the window, landed in the field, was still rolling, and captured our vehicle in perfect frame, tumbling through the field. And we had no idea that had happened until the next day when Brad had, taken his camera out of his bag. It was all mangled, and he's like, "Oh my God, look at this." But there was a night, where it's just, I thought I was the goner, and we had just tumbled hard over and over and over and over, and we had finally come to rest in the field, right side up, actually, and I just remember thinking to myself, oh my God, like I can't believe that I'm alive because I really thought I was going to die. And I remember yelling to the other guys, "Are you okay? Is everybody okay?" And they were all like, "Yeah, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good," you know. And the wind was still whipping through the car. I mean, all the windows had gotten knocked out, but there was still, 100-mile-an-hour winds whipping through our car. So we all stayed down for about another minute or so, and then finally pulled ourselves out of the vehicle with just, I just had a couple scratches on me. Brad, our cameraman, literally didn't have a scratch on him, and Austin, our driver, was pretty banged up. We didn't know at the time. He was kind of running on adrenaline at the time. He had pulled himself out of the window, kind of Dukes of Hazzard style, and no one had any idea how injured he was. He didn't even know until a little bit later when he started having some chest pains, and here to find out that he had cracked his sternum, he had cracked a vertebrae in his neck, he ended up getting a black eye. And we had no idea he was in that bad a shape. We had all gone to the hospital after that just to get checked out to make sure that everybody was okay. And we had no idea that Austin was that bad until the doctors had checked him out and said, "Yeah, you're in pretty bad shape. Let's get you fixed."
And I remember you mentioning at NWA on our ride actually to dinner that night about how the car you were in was constructed differently. In the back, there were a lot of metal racks, correct, to put the camera equipment and the broadcast equipment on, and that's kind of what saved your cameraman from any injuries.
Yeah, I think so. So right behind the back seat, well, it's a big car too, which certainly helped. A big, I think the estimated weight with all our equipment and everything is about 8,500 pounds. And we have racks in the back, metal racks, and we look at our vehicle. A lot of the roof had collapsed down in, especially in the front where it had been tumbling. But I think just that little bit of extra metal support in the back is what kept more of the rear of the vehicle from collapsing in anymore. And I think that's probably why our cameraman Brad didn't have any injuries, is because everyone had their seatbelts on. He was jostled around a little bit, but the roof didn't cave down on him like it did in the front, and literally over the driver's side, the roof was down to the headrest, and so that caused some injuries for Austin. I was ducked way down into the seat, so I was down lower, but I do remember hitting we got jostled around so hard. I do remember getting flung around inside the car. I distinctly remember hitting my head on the airbag because the side airbags had deployed because we were rolling sideways, and I distinctly remember hitting my head on the airbag once, and then I remember swallowing some glass too. But it was a ride of a lifetime, that's for sure.
Mike, I got a question from one of our viewers, Andy. I hope I'm saying this right. Bukowski. All right. He wants to know did El Reno change the way that you chase storms?
Yes, absolutely. After that, we had decided that we needed to. There was a few things about that tornado that were a little bit different for us. We didn't have all of our regular crew with us that we normally have, that we had been with for years, and everyone's really familiar with how everyone operates and everything. We usually had a second meteorologist with us that we didn't end up having that time, so it was on me to be the sole meteorologist in the group. And so after that, we definitely took a hard look at what went wrong that day, and put in a few more safety precautions. And we always have a second meteorologist with them. It's not an option anymore not to have one. We won't chase if we don't have two meteorologists with us at all times. Someone to keep a really close eye on the radar, because I don't always have that luxury. If I'm broadcasting, I can't always keep a close eye on the radar, and sometimes you lose perspective if you're watching a storm of which way it's moving or how fast it's moving, and having someone else. So a second set of eyes is always really, really important. And on high-risk days in metropolitan areas, we're not. Those are days we won't chase. I think it's important for us to transmit the message, and we don't have a problem broadcasting, but just not chasing on those days, and making sure we're in some place where we can react to a disaster if, God forbid, it happens, but just at least be there to tell people what's coming without chasing. We need to set a good example. It's one of those deals where if we don't practice what we preach, then we're not doing anybody any service. So,
right. Scotty has a question, I believe.
Yeah, I'd muted myself. Mike, just kind of go back to that tornado chase, the last part of May. More Oklahoma getting hit, and obviously the El Reno tornado. kind of take us back in time. What was that like for that couple of week time span of seeing all these major tornadoes hit and just almost a centralized location where these poor people, I mean, they're getting hit left and right.
Yeah, I think you live in central Oklahoma, you know the risk, and I think they live with anxiety every spring. I don't think it ever goes away, and I think when you have big tornadoes like Moore, like El Reno, that do some serious damage, I think it's always a reminder, and it's always a time. I mean, anytime, March through June, I feel like the poor people of Oklahoma are always just whacked out. I don't want to say whacked out, but they are. I mean, it's like they live in fear almost every day, and you hate to see that. But if there's any place where they are aware of weather, it is in Oklahoma. It's funny that we'll stop and we'll just be filling up for gas, and people are asking us about the weather, are tornadoes coming, because they see our vehicles or whatnot. And I'm not kidding when I tell you this. They want to talk about cape values, and they want to talk wind shear. I mean, they know tornadoes, so sometimes they're pretty remarkable, what they know. So it's great on one hand. They're so knowledgeable about it, but at the same time, you feel for them when they have to live through that every single spring.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I want to jump in and just ask you, what part of the tornado do you think hit you? Because I've been hearing there's been a lot of studies now on that El Reno tornado. They talk about these vortices, and they were moving at, I don't know what speed they were moving in. But do you think those outer vortices actually clipped you, or was it just a plain old direct hit?
No, it was definitely one of the vortices that hit us. I had some conversations with Josh Werman from the Center for Severe Weather Research, and their Doppler was operating at the time, and he had sent me a couple of images, and he wanted to know, what our exact location was, and they had measured directly above. I know I had some notes on this. Directly above our vehicle at like 200 meters, they measured 200-mile-an-hour wind. But he said that because we were kind of on the southern side of the whole thing with weaker overall circulation there. But knowing that we had seen all these vortices spinning, and from our position and what Dr. Werman had seen on his radar and the multiple vortices that they had charted, he said it's pretty much a foregone conclusion we were hit by one of these vortices. But think about those. Some of them lasted literally a second, and they were traveling at a ground speed of anywhere from 200 to 300 miles an hour forward ground speed. And most of those, I think he said the longest subvortex that he measured, at least that would be considered a multivortex. I think some of the shorter ones were about a second long, and some of the longer ones, maybe as much as 10 seconds. But they were just very quick, race along the ground, spin at 300 miles an hour and a forward ground speed at 300 miles an hour. And he suspected that's because let me go back a little bit to kind of give it the lay of land. We were traveling in 3 vehicles, and so the vehicle I was traveling in was in the middle. And so our first vehicle got pulled off the side of the road, as I was telling you, into the ditch. Our vehicle got hit and thrown the other direction, and then our satellite truck behind us didn't even move off the highway. And so knowing all that, it's a foregone conclusion that we were probably sliced right down the middle of our caravan by one of these subvortices, and it just tossed us.
And I think Austin has a question, and we're going to transition to our last topic, and that's Buffalo's winter storm for this year. Austin?
Okay, so out of all of the tornadoes that you have been in, saying El Reno and Joplin, what is one thing that you think that both of those cities could have done to better prepare themselves?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, I'm not sure there's anything they could have done in El Reno to better prepare for that. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion afterwards, especially about chaser safety and that kind of stuff, or vehicles out on the roadways. It was a Friday and it was rush hour, and it's just a really bad time. But that's also prime time for tornadoes. So if anything, maybe it's err on the side of caution. Maybe it's one of those early dismissals from school. Maybe it's a work from home kind of day, so that you reduce the number of vehicles out on the roadways, because the last thing you want to do is have a tornado cut through rush hour traffic, which came right across I-40, and that's the last thing you want to do, because you're pretty much a sitting duck. So I'm not sure there's a whole lot more they could have done in El Reno. They're very prepared in central Oklahoma for tornadoes. In Joplin, maybe a little bit different. I think they hadn't experienced something like that in a very, very long time. So I think better communication. That was a Sunday. It was a Sunday afternoon. Probably not a lot of people necessarily paying that close of attention to the weather, and it was one of those deals where the tornado sirens had gone off so many times for them in the past, and nothing had happened, that it was a cry wolf type of thing in Joplin. And so people just kind of learned to ignore tornado sirens. And so when they see a thunderstorm coming and the tornado siren goes off, they're like, oh yeah, another one of those thunderstorms, and it's probably going to be windy and there'll be a lot of rain, but that's it. And the thing about the neighborhood that it went through, a lot of homes, very tightly compacted neighborhoods where homes are almost right on top of each other. And these are 1930s, 40s, 50s homes. They're kind of smaller homes, 2-bedroom homes, 3-bedroom homes with 1 bathroom. Maybe they've got a crawl space, maybe they don't. Most of them didn't have basements. And so you hit this really congested area of Joplin, and to me, it was a worst case scenario. You couldn't have gone through a worse part of town, hitting a hospital, hitting just about every single school in town, hitting really densely populated neighborhoods. So I think it was probably communication, weather awareness was the biggest thing to take away out of Joplin, that they just weren't aware of what the dangers really could be.
By the way, do you see why we brought Austin?
What's that?
I said, do you see why we brought Austin?
Nice. Very nice.
And Mike, and I know we're going to get to the Buffalo snowstorm, but I want to one more point about the El Reno. There was a lot of flooding with that storm as well. And then in the Joplin case, a lot of people maybe here in the southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, our terrain is kind of similar to what Joplin is. It's not the flat plains like you see out in Kansas and Oklahoma and stuff. So I think a big myth around here in these parts, and you probably dealt with it with your time at WLOS, is people don't believe those big monstrous tornadoes can actually hit here in the valleys, the foothills, even some of the Piedmont mountain parts of the Carolinas.
Yeah, I mean, there tends to be that common thought that it's not going to happen. The Appalachians protect us, and it's not going to be anything for us. I think the 2011 tornadoes, certainly proved that to be false. I think there, you could make some argument that Asheville foothills, parts of the Piedmont, maybe Winston-Salem down towards Charlotte. Maybe you could make an argument for maybe a tornado or severe weather shadow there. But I think once you get farther east of there, I think all bets are off, and you get down through the Midlands and South Carolina or Low Country, and I think all bets are off there too. You just have to be aware and just take it seriously. To me, what's the harm in over-preparing? If it doesn't happen, okay, then there's no harm done. But if you under-prepare and you're not in the know about the weather, you can put yourself in a world of hurt for sure.
Yeah, one thing, and Joey heard this as well last week at the tornado conference that we were at. They said prepare for the big one, because it can happen. And like you say, if you over prepare, then so what? You're prepared for the next storm that's gonna affect your area.
Totally agree. I mean, where I live here in Atlanta, and it's very hilly, and my wife who's also a meteorologist, we feel pretty safe in our home, but we've discussed it many times. If severe weather's coming, where are we going to go? We don't have a basement in our home. We have a crawl space, but we have a lower level that's half underground, and we've talked about it multiple times. We're in the bathroom. We've got a half underground floor. We're going in there, and we have a box. We literally have a Rubbermaid box. It's not a big one, but just got a few important things in it. And that's where we go, and we're ready. We just don't want to take any chances. We've seen too many disasters and too much heartache and too much suffering to not be prepared now. And I think it's why it doesn't take long either. You can put together a little safety kit for your family and a little plan in an hour or two, and you're done. And you don't even have to think about it after that.
So, Mike, I have a viewer question that came in. Brandon Black, he's a student at NC State. He asks, how can future meteorologists help improve public safety and knowledge, and what direction do we need to start that change overall?
Well, I think it gets better and better every year. I think that the National Weather Service is making a lot of strides in what they're doing. And it used to be, tornado sirens, and then those are just, tornado sirens are antiquated. I mean, they're only for outside, and they only have so much range, and it's impacted by trees and buildings and terrain and all that kind of stuff. And I think now, with the mobile phone, everyone's got the cell phone now, and you can get instant alerts. I think the personalization of the warnings, GPS located, I don't think there's any reason to not be aware or not have a means of being alerted. But it's on all of us, all of us that have a hand in weather, from the National Weather Service to emergency managers to broadcasters. I think you just have to inundate people with the message. And once you do, because everyone ingests it one way or another, whether it's through their cell phone, through an automatic alert, whether it's through Twitter, or they're being alerted by their friends through Facebook, I think you just have to flood them with the information and hope that they get it. All you can do is give them the information. What they do with it after that is up to them. But if we've done our jobs as meteorologists, as broadcasters, and we've given them the message, that's all we can do.
One last topic, and then can you hear it, Daniel?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
There you go. Go right ahead before your audio maybe cuts out again.
Hey, guys, I bought a new computer, and my audio's all messed up, so I went back to the old reliable.
Go ahead and throw your question in if you want, unless it ties in the next thing.
Hey, Mike, first off, I'd like to thank you for coming on. I live in McDowell County, North Carolina, just to the east of the Asheville area, and I remember the time that you spent at WLOS, and I hope I could have asked you this earlier. What were some of the things about the mountains of western North Carolina that you really liked? Where are some places that you went, and what are some great things about this part of the country that you learned in your 3 years?
Probably one of my favorite places to go is the Arboretum in Asheville. It's always fun to go there and go mountain biking. I spent a lot of time there. It was awesome. Loved going up to Mount Pisgah and hiking up there. The view is outrageously awesome. Craigie Gardens is always a fun spot to go. I love going there as well. Didn't go up to Mount Mitchell as many times as I like. Only been up there a couple of times, and never really got to go up there in the winter to see some good rime ice or anything like that. But just the outdoors in western North Carolina are awesome. It's just, and the seasons can be, honestly, seasons can be relatively mild there. Winters can be mild, summers can be mild. It's great, and there's so much wilderness. I remember, the station on the south side of Asheville there. I'll never forget. I think it was probably my first year there. There's so much wildlife around the station even. There were wild turkeys in the front yard, and I literally hit a deer in the parking lot once. And the deer actually hit me. It ran into the side of my car. And we used to get these messages from our news director saying, hey, there have been bear spottings out back at the trash cans. So we had this back door that didn't have a window to it. So you exited out the back door to go to your parking lot to go to your car. And they said, make sure, and there was a big note always posted on it, make sure you pound on the door, before you exit, to scare the bears away if there's a bear at the back door, because there were literally bear tracks in the snow just outside the back door. Or walk with a partner, use the buddy system walking to your car. So I love the wildlife. The forecasting there was a new experience for me. It was frustrating at times, especially in the winter. And I learned, about that rain shadow very quickly. I think I over-forecasted quite a few rain events, and you learn after a while that I learned after a while to pull back on the forecast quite a bit. So it was a learning experience for sure, but a really fun one too.
I tell you, me living here all my life, I've been very blessed to live in this part of the country. It's so great, and like you said, a lot of good things to do. And I don't know if you've been to Asheville lately, but that South Asheville area where the station is currently located, it has really exploded in population and development.
Yeah. I was there, I don't know, about a year ago or so, and I was like, wow. Like when I was here, it was just beginning. They had just built a new neighborhood there. They had just built a station. I think Volvo had just built there, and they had just built a YMCA, and now it's just like taken off. I was like, holy cow, this this is amazing. Even downtown has transformed quite a bit since I was there. It's really fun place to visit now. And the restaurants are outrageous, you know.
Oh yeah, and funny you mentioned biking because I remember the station did that feature on you going up to Mount Mitchell and the assault on Mount Mitchell.
Oh my God, that haunted me for a long time. That was probably the one of the worst physical experiences of my life was doing the assault on Mount Mitchell, that bike ride from Spartanburg up to the top of Mount Mitchell. I have never experienced that kind of pain in my life. Proud to say, I finished it. But it was windy. I think there was even it was started raining at the start of the race. At one point there was a hailstorm. It got really windy and cold. There was like a wind chill of 17 at the top of the hill or something, mountain. It was ridiculous. I think like a third of the field dropped out, and it took me like 10 hours to finish it. It was miserable. But I got the patch, so that's all that matters, right?
That's right. You know, for folks that don't know much about that, that's what, early mid-spring when that occurred?
I think that race is in May, and you can get all kinds of crazy weather for that thing, you know. And it's I think was it Bicycle Magazine rated it like the second hardest bike race in America or something like that. Another one was some crazy race in Colorado that no one's ever finished. So
no doubt.
It was pretty crazy.
And you know, just the jump in elevation over a short distance at the last part of that trek is just amazing.
The last bit of that when you're going up the Blue Ridge Parkway, I remember they had water stations and food stations like every 5 miles. And it would take me an hour to get from one water station to the next. So I was literally doing 5 miles an hour. I mean, it was like I was going backwards. It was torture. But once you cross the finish line, you're like, oh, thank God, get me off this bike. Give me a nice warm bath and some food, and I'm just going to sleep for like the next 4 days.
Yeah. When you was going through McDowell County, I believe you went by Tom Johnson's. You were like within a mile of where I live here in the county, and
awesome.
When you start going up Highway 80, man, that thing, it winds in a hurry, don't it? Above Lake Tahoma.
You know, it's great. You know, the first part of that race, you're like, no big deal, and you just have this, I don't know, for whatever reason, I had this in my mind that it wasn't going to be that hard, and as soon as you get to the base of the mountain, you're like, oh man, what have I gotten myself into? And it's a mental and physical struggle the entire time.
All right, real quick, Mike, because I don't mean to hold you too late here. Talk a little bit about Buffalo earlier this year, and then Joey's got one final question.
Oh, Buffalo was awesome. We were there in mid-November. I'm actually doing a PowerPoint presentation on it. I'm doing a presentation on it at Ohio State Severe Weather Symposium this Friday. So it's all very fresh in my mind. It was epic. I had never been to anything like it in my life. We were in Hamburg, New York, and the lake effect snow bands just aligned beautifully for 5 days, and we ended up getting 40 inches of snow the first day, and then it tapered off a little bit, and then we kind of got nickeled and dimed the next day, and then we got another 40 inches the next day. So we actually ended up with 79.5 inches of snow officially in Hamburg in the course of 5 days, and it was like the movie Shining. Like, you couldn't go anywhere. We were trapped in our hotel. You couldn't get anywhere. We had to actually rescue our cameraman Matt. He was in another vehicle, and we started reporting, and we had to go rescue him because he had slipped off the road into a ditch, and we had this 4x4, this big pickup truck. But once we got to our hotel after the first wave of snow, we couldn't go anywhere after that, and we were. It was awesome. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It was just something like I've never seen before. I mean, the town was just buried. Being out there and literally walking on the New York Thruway, I-90, we're literally walking on it. Like, there were no vehicles out there. I mean, the whole thing was shut down. I've never just walked on a highway before, but it was so awesome, and that I'll never forget it. It was memorable for sure. The baddest snowstorm I've ever covered.
I think I need to experience that one time.
Scotty, the complete snow optimist there. Oh,
Joey.
all right, yeah, I was going to go ahead. I got one question from Twitter. Heather wants to know, have you ever been to Wisconsin? And a second question to that, she also want to know, can fans tour the Weather Channel? What can they do to get down there?
Yes, I have been to Wisconsin many, many times. Thumbs up to the cheese curds. And Wausau, maybe the most underrated city in the Midwest. Love Wausau. We've done a little bit of chasing there, but not a lot of success. Eau Claire, Wausau is kind of where we ended up doing some chasing. So I actually love Wisconsin. It's a fun state. The people there are really great. We don't give official tours at the Weather Channel, so sorry.
The throw one in personal for me, though, I got to ask. Tim mentioned over in our little chat earlier. Since you've had a lot of experience chasing the planes, you got to answer the most important question for all of us chasers. Where's the best place to eat?
Oh, that's an easy one. That is LB Brewery and Gella's. It's all one. It's just a little gem in Hayes, Kansas. It's a little micro brew, and they've got the best food you've ever had. They got great soft pretzels there. They've got great schnitzel. Oh man, and the beer and the root beer, phenomenal. So it's always a must if you're ever in Kansas to go to Hayes. It's right off of I-70. It's in a little downtown, brick roads. It's awesome.
Make sure you write that down for us, Scotty, if we ever make our way back out to Kansas.
Gella's. You cannot miss Gella's.
I was also going to tell you, you mentioned Mount Mitchell earlier. You really have to get up there during the snow. We did a thing, I guess I was 16 or 17. We did one of them camps where you used the 0-degree sleeping bags and the tent, and we ended up in literally a blizzard that night. We got like about 6 or 8 inches of snow, but it all came in like 5 or 6 hours, and then it cleared off completely clear with a full moon on the top of Mount Mitchell, everything covered in snow. It's probably one of the greatest sights I've ever seen in my entire life.
I love being up there on a crisp fall day where you can see from miles, and there's no haze and there's no pollution. I think that's when it's really awesome to be up there.
And speaking of biking from Greenville to Mount Mitchell, I wheeze if I walk from the parking lot to the summit. So.
Well, you never know. You never know.
All right, Mike. Go ahead and plug your social media and tell people how they can get in touch with you. And a question: Are you going to be at NWA this year?
I'm undecided on NWA at this point. I may make a game time decision to go. Easy to find on Twitter and Facebook. It's just Mike Bettis.
All right.
Well, Mike, we're very appreciative of your time tonight, and sorry that we ran you over a little bit longer. But
I am never coming back on you guys' show ever again. No, it's been fun, guys. It's fun talking about the weather, so I don't mind at all. It's been great.
Well, great. We're glad
anymore, so it's not as bad.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on, and we'd love to have you back on. Maybe after our spring chase season, we can grab you back on and talk about some events or anything ever happened in the Carolinas or something like that. We'd love to have you on anytime. So.
Anytime. You just name it, and I'll be there. It's been great talking to you guys.
I'll tell you a show, Mike. I want to do. I'd like to get you and Jeff Bertowski on here to talk about Joplin together.
I'll never get a word in with Jeff.
I was going to say we might have to make that like a 2-hour show or something.
No, seriously, Mike. Last Monday we were talking with Jeff about he was chasing Irene out here on the Outer Banks. We were there for 45 minutes and he was still not finished, and they were trying to push us out of the convention center. So he is a talker.
He does like to talk. So if you're a good listener, it's a good match.
He is. He's a good guy. But Mike, thank you again. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it, and I know it's kind of a touchy subject and something that's really changed your life. But I really do appreciate you sharing it with us tonight.
Oh, not a problem, guys. I really appreciate talking to you. Have a great evening.
Thanks. You do the same.
Yeah. Bye.
Goodbye. All right, guys. Well, that was fun. Sorry for you guys who are listening or following along. We're a little bit over time, but a great guy, man. He's really awesome.
I
Anybody?
agree
Yeah, Mike,
totally.
I didn't realize he had so many North Carolina connections until we, dug them all out of him, and he was like, "Yeah, I remember this and that and this," and he sounds like he wants to come back to North Carolina.
Daniel, what's your? I mean, you lived in his market, so what are your memories of Mike being on TV and giving the forecast?
Well, Mike's stay in Asheville was fairly short, just like I said, about 2.5, 3 years, and um, I don't honestly remember as far as winter weather us having any big snow or ice events while he was here, but uh, you know, forecasting this part of the country is always tough, and he was very popular when he took the chief meteorologist role at Channel 13, and he did a really good job. And listened to a story earlier in the show about how he just kind of stumbled upon the fact that Weather Channel wanted him, and that was definitely a wise decision on his part. He's really come a long ways.
You can speak for this with anybody else, but it seems like the Asheville and Greenville-Spartanburg market has really got a lot of people to the Weather Channel.
Yes, it has. I don't know if it's got anything to do with the relative close location, because you can get from, say, Atlanta to Asheville in about 4 hours. But he did that, and there was some other people even prior to him coming to Asheville that actually left and went to Atlanta. And I think that's kind of how he got his job in Asheville, because there was an opening because somebody went to the Weather Channel. So it's been kind of weird. Our television market in Western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina, it's been like it's been a pipeline for those down in Atlanta.
It really has. So we'll kind of finish up this show. I'm going to let Daniel talk about his event next week, and then we'll let Ricky hit on Weatherfest, and then I know Joey has a rant to kind of close us up with the show. So, Daniel, I know you really put a lot of stuff into next week's show.
Yeah, we had a huge show. We've been promoting it for quite a while. Next Wednesday night, March the 11th, we're going to be talking about the Superstorm of March 13th, 1993. We're going to be getting close to the 22nd anniversary of that event. And I think anybody that lived in really the eastern U.S., the entire eastern part of the U.S., if you were here in March of 1993, that was a phenomenal event. And for me, a guy in my mid-30s, that event, along with Hurricane Hugo, has been kind of the two big weather events in this part of the country in my lifetime. And I will never forget what happened with that event. But it's great. We're going to have a big show next week. We're going to have Rob Fowler from down in Charleston, South Carolina. He'll be talking about the coastal impacts of that storm, and that's the big thing. You had basically when it comes to pressure and the effects on the coastline from the Gulf Coast to off the East Coast, it was basically like a wintertime hurricane. And then when you got inland, you had the blizzard aspect. And we'll have Gary Stevenson will be on. Gary works at News 14 Carolina down in the Triangle, North Carolina. And his connection to that, once again, goes back to the Asheville area, because he worked at WLOS back in March '93. And I know he'll have a lot of great things to talk about from that storm, because not often as a meteorologist in this part of the country do you wake up and see that a blizzard warning's been issued. I'll be curious next week. I'll ask him in particular what was his reaction when that happened, because that stuff just does not happen around here. That's maybe a once or twice in a lifetime type event to happen. And plus, we have our other guest, and I apologize to the guy. I keep forgetting his name. He's from Birmingham. Brian Peters. Really, that's where, as far as the major snow and the blizzard aspect of that storm, that's really where it got started over Alabama and into Georgia. So it'll be interesting to get his comments and his recollections of what happened. So next week, I'll look back at the March superstorm of 1993. That's going to be one heck of a show, and I know I know me and Joey, because we're around that age, we remember that stuff. For some of you guys, you're a little bit younger and probably don't remember that stuff. That's going to be a lot of great memories that'll be brought back next Wednesday night.
Yeah, and we're going to have three guys on that are none of which are short on words. So that'll be an interesting show.
Yeah, looking forward to next week's show with Rob and Gary and Brian was the warning coordinator for the Birmingham National Weather Service office. So, like Daniel said, that's kind of where the storm evolved and then moved into our area. So, after that, the next week we're going to have Cheryl Nelson on for emergency preparedness week, I believe. I just totally lost my train of thought. And then working on some shows for next month, for the month of April. We're going to do the tornado outbreak that we kind of talked a little bit about tonight in the eastern part of North Carolina. We're going to try to get some guests on for that show. And then we're going to talk about the super outbreak in Alabama of 2011 as well. So a couple of neat opportunities coming up for that. So Cheryl Nelson, after next week's show, she's a freelance meteorologist. Does a lot for preparing for natural disasters, which something you're going to learn about in the next couple of weeks down at UNC Charlotte with Ricky. Ricky, you want to plug your event coming up?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and throw a plug in. I was going to show you the flyer, but I didn't want to cooperate tonight. Charlotte Weatherfest, the first ever edition of Charlotte Weatherfest, March 21st at UNC Charlotte. We're going to have free parking at East Decks 1 and 2. And then we'll have signs, volunteers to guide you to where we're going to hold our event, and that's in the McHenry building. So we're going to have kids' activities. We're going to have meteorologists from NBC Charlotte, WSOC, WBTV, and Time Warner Cable News out there. We're going to have some raffles throughout the day. Midland Radio is sending me a couple weather radios to give out, and we're going to have lots of other activities and displays from various weather vendors and weather enthusiasts across the state. So come on out. It's a free event, 1 to 5 p.m. on March 21st at UNC Charlotte.
And bring the kids.
And especially bring the kids. And, of course, Joey and Scotty will be there. If you're up in the Burke area, you can meet your Burke County weather meteorologist, and you can meet Joey, too. So, and Austin's coming as well. So all of our panel members will be there. So.
Yes, we'll be there to represent and lend a hand however we need to help. So we're looking forward to that. And I know it's going to be a great event. I know this is something Ricky's really wanted to do. So he's looking forward to it. And I think he's finally got everybody on the UNCC side. I mean, they're ready for this, right? Because I know they wasn't expecting all these people at first.
Yeah, they're ready, or they're just kind of accepting it now. I'm not really sure which one it is, but they're in too far to back out. So, police department's fully on board. That's all I need.
Can you promise us they won't be any winter weather down there that time of the year?
I can't, and the event is outside. So, in the event of severe weather, we have a few inclement weather plans. But as I tell our event planners and the people in the school who are worried about inclement weather, I'm like, look, we're going to have 30 of Charlotte's best meteorologists there. So if we don't see it coming, we got no excuse.
That's exactly right.
I got a feeling that if we do have severe weather, you won't have 30 meteorologists there. We'll all be somewhere else, wherever that's going to be.
Well, that too, yeah.
Well, and we are talking about emergency preparedness, and a lot of people in the state of North Carolina knew this was Severe Weather Awareness Week, and today was the tornado aspect of the day and the tornado drill that went off at 9:30, and that's where I bring in Joey. Joey?
Yeah, I haven't had a rant recently, but I felt the need. I know we're way over time, and I got to keep it short. I could go an hour on this. So many people today, when we posted those mornings on the Catawba County Weather, Burke Weather, McDowell Weather, Caldwell Weather, all those social media outlets, we went right along with the National Weather Service, prepared our warnings, posted them out there to let everybody know what was going on. And lo and behold, so many people were caught off guard. And then the fact that we're caught off guard is concerning to us, obviously. But beyond that, so many of them actually got angry. They were like, I can't believe you would do this to me. I can't believe you scared me like that. And the first thing that came to my head, and I won't mention his name because I don't want to call him out right here on the show, but a guy has become a good friend of mine. Actually, I met him a couple years ago. He actually has a fear of tornadoes. It's a real general, been to a psychologist, fear of rotating storms. It's actually got a name, and I can't remember what that fear is actually called. But I thought about him for a moment. And I thought about what I told him way back then when he said he was always frightened of these tornadoes. Fear is rooted in lack of preparation, period. if you are prepared, if you are ready to go, it takes away the fear. And these people who got mad because they were scared into this tornado, they need to look at themselves and realize that they're not prepared. Let's be honest, that the mock tornado drill was coming, and we knew it weeks in advance. We all made a post on the pages letting everybody know it was coming, yet they still saw it and got scared. And it's been advertised all over, everywhere knows about it. They knew it was coming. Most schools told their kids earlier, we're going to have a tornado drill day, guys. Be ready. I don't know when it's going to be. That kind of thing. Yet these people were scared when, and they became, some of them said, it scared me. I thought it was real, and I went to my basement, which was great. That's great. It's exactly what they should have done. They practiced it right there. It was perfect. They did exactly what they should have done. They grabbed their kids, they went to the basement, and they realized it was a drill, and they kind of laughed at themselves, but they did good. That's what you should do. The other people who just plain got mad and said we shouldn't scare them by posting those kinds of things, that's just crazy. That's like I said again, lack of preparation is where fear is born. You have to. Thank you, Jake, for stepping in here. Sorry. But you have to actually be do these practices, get prepared. I promise you, it will alleviate your fears. If you are 100% ready for a tornado, when a tornado strikes, if a tornado was headed right for my house right now, obviously you have a fear for your family and their safety. Of course, that's without saying. But I'm completely prepared. I know where I'm going to go. I know what I need to bring. I know that I got to get my kids into a safe place. I got to get their heads covered with some sort of helmet or something to protect their head. I know all of those steps, and because I know all of those steps and I know what to do and I'm going to be ready when it happens, my fear goes away. And that's what other people need to learn. That's what all these people who get so scared about, just for like today, the people who got scared, they're not prepared. They need to be prepared. Get prepared. It will alleviate your fears. I promise you. You won't have to get mad at us anymore. You won't have to get mad because we made you practice. I'm not sure what that was all about anyway, but obviously you need it. But anyway, that's my rant. I'll keep it short. Scotty, I'm sure you want to add a little bit of something to it, so go ahead.
Yeah, it just kind of ruined my day, honestly, seeing people call us out and saying we're irresponsible and stuff like that. This was a tornado drill. This was something the governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, sent to every single school, every single state agency got this email early in the morning and said, hey, at 9:30, there's going to be a tornado drill. The National Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg, and I'm sure they did it in Raleigh and Morehead City. They all said, hey, at 9:30, we're going to be issuing this tornado drill for the entire state. I'm glad it got your attention, but there's no need to be throwing forks and darts at us because, we're just doing our job. We're here to make sure you're prepared. If you listen tonight to Mike Bettis, the one thing he said about Joplin was they were not weather ready. They had heard the false alarms, and they weren't prepared for something. In our post today, I hit every county we covered. In 2012, there was an EF3 tornado that came through eastern Burke County with winds of 135, 40 miles per hour. In Catawba County, there was a tornado EF2 back in 2012 or 13, I believe.
2010.
2010. There was an EF4.
1989 had an EF4 tornado.
Yeah,
in Catawba County
there was
also.
a EF4 tornado that went through Cleveland, Lincoln, and Catawba County in 1989. There was a EF4 tornado that hit Caldwell County in 1998. There was a tornado that hit just last year in McDowell County. I'm sure there's been several tornadoes in Austin's area. There's been tornadoes everywhere. It doesn't matter if you live in mountains, foothills, Piedmont, coastal areas. Ask Myrtle Beach about their tornado several years ago that just did destruction on the beach. It doesn't matter where you live. You need to be prepared for the big storm because eventually, it may not be in your lifetime, but eventually every area is going to be hit by a big disaster, whether it be a tornado, hurricane, microburst, a freezing rain event, ice event. You need to be prepared. Don't throw darts at us. That should tell you, hey, I'm not prepared. I need to make those plans, and I need to be ready for the next event. Austin?
Yeah, Austin, please send out something to your fellow students. We already talked about it earlier. Say it to them.
Okay, so today we had the tornado drill at our school, and the kids were complaining that their back hurt, their head hurt, their hair was messed up, Their butt was showing they should have wore different pants, that we shouldn't have to do this, that we don't get tornadoes here, where our school will never be hit by a tornado. Well, Joplin, Missouri, when them kids went home on Friday afternoon, I'm pretty sure that none of them were thinking that their school would be hit by an EF5 tornado that Sunday afternoon.
Austin,
They never thought about that.
Austin, that Joplin High School, those kids graduated an hour before that tornado hit. They were holding graduation in that school an hour before that tornado hit.
They were lucky.
No doubt. And again, none of them thought that that was coming either. So you're exactly right there. And if,
Don't cast stones at us. Be prepared. You know, we all have a job, and I wrote it down right here, and I'm going to put it on my computer desk. I'm going to put it in my office at Burke Weather and anywhere else, and I'll give it to anybody. Mike Bettis said, quote, "You have to give them the information, and it's up to them to decide what they want to do with it." And that's what we did today.
yeah,
And on that,
I'll throw one more thing in there. You were just talking about the, talking about them throwing stones at us. You know what? If they would have threw stones at us today because they would have said the words, "I wish you wouldn't have told me about the tornado drill because I already know exactly what I'm going to do, and I don't need to practice anymore," which isn't true. You always need to practice. But my point is, if they were all prepared and nobody was scared and everybody knew what was happening, knew what was going on, and they got mad because they knew and they don't need to practice, I would feel a lot better about it in that case. But you still need to practice. Don't take that as that. But my point is,
well, you're talking about practicing, and you and I were sitting in the same convention last week. They said practice until something goes wrong, because then you didn't prepare for that thing that went wrong.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, I guess kids on days. I hope those kids went home today from Austin school and said, "You know what? The next time the weather says there's going to be a chance of tornadoes today, I'm going to wear pants that don't show my butt when I get down in tornado position." Hopefully the drill taught them that, because that's what it's for. Make sure you're ready for these kinds of things. And by the way, for those of you who were surprised by it, guess what? That's how tornado warnings work. They come with a surprise,
Sure.
So get used to it.
All right, anybody have anything to add before we kind of sign off?
Yeah, let's sign off. We're hours past our time.
This is
people
probably
probably
It's past my bedtime.
probably the longest Carolina Weather Group discussion that we've had, but it's been great. Again, a big thanks to Mike Bettis for coming on. It took a lot for him. It's a very touchy subject. I mean, it affected his life of what he went through, and it was really neat to hear his story.
Scotty, you can say it changed our lives being there 4 years later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, no doubt.
Yeah, we were able to go to the El Reno site. We were able to go to Joplin last week, both of those sites last week, and I took a picture, and if you're Facebook friends with me, you can see it. If not, I'll post it on Burke Weather. But I took a panoramic view of where Mike's crew rolled over at, and it's just nothing but flat land, and at times that tornado was 2.5 miles wide, and it's just coming at you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it was very sombering and very humbling to stand on ground where a lot of lives are changed in Joplin and as well as El Reno. So very cool to have him on, and one of my role models in the weather industry. I've always looked up to Mike. I always liked Mike. He's a good guy. He's a genuine guy, and he kind of just tells you how it is, and we need a lot of that. So, anyways, thanks to Tim for coming on as well. I think Tim's going to be joining us, maybe not on a weekly basis, but as much as he can. He also worked at the Weather Channel, and he's kind of volunteered his services on Wednesday night to come in and hop in on our discussion. So, looking forward to that addition to our panel. So, guys, anything else? I'm going to wrap us up.
That's it. Send it home.
All right, thanks for watching tonight. Remember, next week we have the Blizzard of '93 special with Gary Stevenson, Brian Peters, and Rob Fowler. And until next week, have a great week and stay safe.
Bye, Fuggles.